The dust tasted like death itself. As Nora Langley collapsed against the wooden post outside the Ukiah, California General Store, her vision blurring as another wave of dizziness threatened to pull her under completely. She had not eaten in 5 days. The coins she had carefully rationed from San Francisco had run out 3 towns ago, and the stagecoach driver who had promised her safe passage to her aunt's ranch had abandoned her here in this God-forsaken town when she could no longer pay. That had been 2 days ago. 2 long days of watching the world spin around her, while her stomach ate itself from the inside out, and her legs grew weaker with each passing hour. The July heat of 1882 beat down mercilessly on the main street, and Nora could feel her consciousness slipping away like sand through desperate fingers. She was 19 years old, and she was going to die here in the dust of a town she did not know, surrounded by strangers who stepped around her as if she were nothing more than another piece of trash blown in by the desert wind. Through her fading vision, she saw boots approaching. Brown leather, scuffed and worn but well cared for, they stopped directly in front of her. "Madam," the voice was deep, concerned, with a rough edge that spoke of years under the sun. "Madam, can you hear me?" Nora tried to lift her head, but the effort was too much. Strong hands caught her before she could fall completely, and she found herself looking up into a face that seemed carved from the same rugged landscape that surrounded them. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of whiskey that held genuine worry. "When did you last eat?" he asked, and his voice had gone soft in a way that made something in Nora's chest tighten. "I cannot remember," she whispered, and then the darkness took her. When Nora woke, she was moving. The gentle sway beneath her and the creak of wood told her she was in a wagon before she even opened her eyes. The sun had shifted position in the sky, sitting lower on the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "Easy now," that same deep voice said from beside her. "Do not try to sit up too fast. You fainted dead away." Nora turned her head slowly, finding herself looking up at the man who had stopped for her. He sat on the wagon bench, reins in one hand while he kept the other near her shoulder as if ready to steady her if she tried to rise. His profile was strong, all hard lines and weathered skin, but there was something gentle in the way he glanced down at her. "Where are you taking me?" she managed to ask, her throat dry as old paper. "My ranch. It is about 5 miles outside town. I have food there and a proper bed where you can rest." He must have seen the fear flash across her face because he added quickly, "My name is Owen Lawson. I run cattle on 200 acres my father left me. I live alone since he passed last winter, but my nearest neighbor, Mrs. Chen, lives just a mile down the road. She is a good woman who will vouch for my character if you need assurance." Something about the straightforward way he spoke, without artifice or practiced charm, made Nora relax slightly. "I am Nora Langley. I was trying to reach my aunt's ranch near Sacramento, but the stagecoach driver left me in Ukiah when my money ran out." Owen's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his tanned skin. "That is low, even for some of the drivers running these routes. Did he give you any way to contact your aunt?" Nora shook her head, fighting back the tears that threatened. She would not cry. She had not cried when her parents died of influenza in San Francisco 6 months ago, had not cried when she lost their small apartment because she could not pay the rent, had not cried when the driver abandoned her. She would not start now. "Well then," Owen said, his voice taking on a determined edge, "first thing is to get some food in you and let you rest. After that we will figure out how to get word to your aunt. But right now you need to focus on getting your strength back." The ranch came into view as they crested a small hill. It was not large or fancy, but it had a solid, well-maintained look about it. The main house was built of wood with a stone chimney, surrounded by a few outbuildings and corrals where cattle grazed peacefully in the fading light. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. Owen pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and hopped down, coming around to help Nora. She tried to stand on her own, but her legs betrayed her immediately. Without hesitation, Owen swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. "I can walk," Nora protested weakly. "Maybe tomorrow," Owen replied, carrying her up the porch steps and shouldering open the front door. "Today, you let someone help you." The inside of the house was simple but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with a kitchen area to one side and a sturdy table with chairs in the center. Owen carried her to a bedroom off the main room and laid her gently on the bed. "I will get you some food. Start with bread and broth. Your stomach needs to ease back into eating or you will just get sick." He disappeared, and Nora heard him moving around in the kitchen, the clink of dishes and the sound of a fire being stoked. She looked around the room, noting the simple furnishings and the lack of any feminine touch. He had told the truth about living alone. Owen returned carrying a tray with a bowl of steaming broth, several slices of bread, and a cup of water. He set it carefully on the small table beside the bed and helped prop her up with pillows. "Go slow," he cautioned. "I know you are hungry, but your body needs time." Nora wanted to devour everything in sight, but she forced herself to take small, careful bites of the bread and slow sips of the broth. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, and she had to blink back tears at the simple kindness of it. Owen sat in a chair by the window, giving her space but staying close enough to help if needed. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, and Nora found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. He had calloused hands and the lean, strong build of a man who worked hard every day. There was a quiet competence about him that made her feel safe for the first time in months. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally, setting down the half-empty bowl. Her stomach was already protesting the small amount she had eaten. Owen looked at her directly, those whiskey-colored eyes steady and honest. "Because you needed help. Because walking past someone in need is not something I can do and still look at myself in the mirror. Because my mother would have tanned my hide if I had left you there." He paused, then added more softly, "Because you looked like you had given up, and nobody should have to give up like that." The tears Nora had been holding back for months finally spilled over. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She heard Owen move, felt the bed dip as he sat on the edge, and then his hand was on her shoulder, steady and warm. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You are safe now. You will never hunger again, I promise you that." The words, spoken with such quiet conviction, broke something open inside Nora. She cried for her parents, for the life she had lost, for the fear and hunger and loneliness of the past months. And Owen sat beside her, his hand never leaving her shoulder, letting her grief run its course without trying to stop it or make it better with empty platitudes. When her tears finally subsided, Nora found a clean handkerchief pressed into her hand. She wiped her face, embarrassed by her breakdown. "I am sorry," she mumbled. "Do not be. You have been through hell from the sound of it. Sometimes crying is what you need to do." Owen stood, taking the tray. "You should rest now. Sleep as long as you need. I will be just outside if you need anything." As he reached the door, Nora called out, "Owen." He turned back. "Thank you for everything." He nodded, something warm flickering in his eyes. "Get some rest, Nora." She slept for 14 hours straight, and when she woke, the sun was streaming through the window and she could smell coffee brewing. Her stomach growled, actually growled, and she realized she felt hungry rather than desperately starving. It was a good sign. Nora sat up slowly, relieved to find the room stayed steady around her. She was still wearing her travel-stained dress, and she grimaced at the state of it. Looking around, she spotted a basin of water on the dresser with a clean cloth beside it. Owen must have brought it in while she slept. She washed as best she could and tried to smooth her dark hair into something presentable. Looking in the small mirror above the dresser, she was shocked by her own appearance. She had always been slender, but now she looked positively gaunt, her cheekbones sharp and her eyes too large in her pale face. No wonder Owen had looked so concerned. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Owen at the stove, cooking eggs and bacon. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and a smile transformed his serious face. "You look better. How do you feel?" "Hungry," Nora admitted. "Really hungry." "Good. Sit down and I will get you some breakfast. Still need to take it slow, but you can have more today than yesterday." Nora sat at the table, watching as Owen moved efficiently around the kitchen. He poured her coffee, strong and black, and she wrapped her hands around the warm cup gratefully. "I hope you do not mind eggs and bacon," he said, setting a plate in front of her. "My cooking skills are pretty basic." "It smells like heaven," Nora said honestly and dug in. She forced herself to eat slowly, but everything tasted incredible. Owen sat across from her with his own plate, eating in companionable silence. "I was thinking," Owen said after a while, "we should try to get a telegram to your aunt." "Do you know the name of her ranch?" Nora set down her fork, her appetite suddenly diminished. "That is the problem. I only have a first name and a general area. My mother and my aunt had a falling out years ago before I was born. After my parents died, I found an old letter from my aunt tucked away. It was dated 15 years ago, and it mentioned she had married a rancher near Sacramento. Her name was Louise then, Louise Morrison, but if she married, I do not know what her name is now." Owen frowned thoughtfully. "That makes it harder, but not impossible. Ranching communities tend to know each other, especially the established families. I have a friend in Sacramento who might be able to help track her down. In the meantime, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need." "I cannot impose on you like that," Nora protested. "You have already done so much. It is not an imposition. This house is too big for just me anyway, and I could use help with some things around here if you feel up to it once you have your strength back. Besides, I would not feel right sending you off until we know you have somewhere safe to go." Nora looked down at her plate, emotions warring inside her. She barely knew this man, but he had shown her more kindness in one day than she had encountered in months. "I will earn my keep," she said firmly. "I am a good cook and I can clean and mend. My mother made sure I learned proper housekeeping." "Then we have a deal," Owen said, extending his hand across the table. Nora shook it, feeling the callous strength of his grip and the warmth that seemed to radiate from him. The days began to blur together in a pleasant routine. Nora spent the first week mostly resting and eating, feeling her strength slowly return. Owen was patient and kind, never pushing her to do more than she was ready for. He brought her books from the small collection in the house, and she spent hours reading by the window, watching him work with the cattle in the distance. By the second week, Nora was feeling well enough to take over the cooking and some of the lighter housework. She discovered that Owen had not been exaggerating about his basic cooking skills. The man could manage eggs and bacon, and not much else. She took pleasure in preparing real meals, using the well-stocked pantry and the vegetables from the small garden behind the house. The first time she served him a proper dinner, pot roast with potatoes and carrots and fresh biscuits, Owen's face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. "This is incredible," he said around a mouthful of food. I forgot what real cooking tasted like. Nora felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. My mother was an excellent cook. She taught me everything she knew. As they ate, Owen told her stories about the ranch, about his childhood growing up here with his parents, about the hard winter that had taken his father. Nora found herself relaxing in his company, laughing at his dry humor and the self-deprecating way he told stories. In turn, she told him about her life in San Francisco, about her father's bookshop and her mother's love of music. She talked about the influenza that had swept through the city, taking both her parents within days of each other. Owen listened with genuine attention, his eyes sympathetic but not pitying. "They sound like good people," he said when she finished. "They were. They gave me everything they could, even though we never had much money. I wish they could have met you, they would have liked you." The words hung in the air between them, and Nora felt a flutter in her chest at the way Owen's eyes softened when he looked at her. 3 weeks after Owen had brought Nora to the ranch, a rider arrived from town with a telegram. Owen's friend in Sacramento had found her aunt. Louise had indeed married a rancher named George Patterson, and they owned a spread about 30 miles outside Sacramento. The telegram included an address where Nora could write to her. Nora held the piece of paper in trembling hands, staring at the words. This was what she had been hoping for, the answer to her problems. So why did she suddenly feel like crying? "This is good news," Owen said, but his voice sounded oddly flat. "You can write to her, let her know you are all right. I am sure she will want you to come stay with her and her husband." "Yes," Nora said quietly. "Yes, of course, I will write to her today." But as she sat down to compose the letter, Nora found the words would not come. She stared at the blank paper, pen in hand, and realized with startling clarity that she did not want to leave. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, this ranch had stopped feeling like a temporary refuge and started feeling like home. And Owen, with his quiet strength and gentle humor, had become more than just the man who had saved her life. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She barely knew him, had known him less than a month, but the feeling was undeniable. She loved the way he smiled at her over morning coffee, loved the sound of his footsteps on the porch at the end of the day, loved the way he listened when she talked as if her words were the most important thing in the world. But what could she offer him? She was penniless, homeless, completely dependent on his charity. He deserved someone who could be a true partner, not a burden he had picked up off the street. With tears blurring her vision, Nora forced herself to write the letter to her aunt, explaining her situation and asking if she might come to stay. She sealed it carefully and gave it to Owen to post in town the next day. If Owen noticed her subdued mood, he did not mention it. But Nora caught him watching her with an odd expression several times over the next few days, as if he wanted to say something but could not find the words. A week later, the reply came. Aunt Louise's letter was warm and welcoming, expressing horror at what Nora had been through and insisting she come to the ranch immediately. She had already arranged for a stage ticket and sent money for travel expenses. She would be expecting Nora within the month. Nora sat at the kitchen table, the letter in her hands, and felt her heart breaking. This was what she needed, what she should want. Security, family, a place where she belonged. So why did it feel like losing everything? "When will you go?" Owen asked quietly from the doorway. "The stage leaves next Tuesday. My aunt sent money for the ticket." Nora could not look at him, afraid of what she might see in his face, or worse, what she might not see. "I will drive you to town," Owen said, and something in his voice made Nora look up sharply. He was standing rigid, his hands clenched at his sides, and the expression on his face was one of barely controlled emotion. "Owen," she said uncertainly, He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Nora, I need to tell you something before you go, even though I do not have any right to say it. These past weeks with you here, they have been the best of my life. This house feels like a home again instead of just a place to sleep. And you make everything brighter just by being in it." Nora's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Owen, I do not understand." "I am in love with you," he said simply, his eyes burning with intensity. "I know it is too soon, and I know you probably do not feel the same way, but I could not let you leave without telling you. I am in love with you, Nora Langley, and the thought of you getting on that stage and disappearing from my life is tearing me apart. You love me." Nora whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "From almost the first moment. When you looked up at me on that street, so brave and fierce even though you were dying, something in me just knew. You were meant to be mine and I was meant to be yours." He squeezed her hands gently. "But I know you need to go to your aunt. You need family and security, things I cannot really offer you. This ranch barely turns a profit and the work is hard. I have nothing fancy to give you, just me and this place and a promise that I will spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy if you will let me." Tears were streaming down Nora's face now, but they were tears of joy. "You foolish man," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Do you really not know? I love you too. I have been breaking my heart trying to figure out how to leave you. I do not want security or fancy things. I just want you, Owen. Just you." The kiss, when it came, was everything Nora had dreamed a first kiss should be. Owen's lips were gentle but insistent, his hands coming up to cup her face as if she were something precious and fragile. Nora wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding in for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Marry me, Nora." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Owen let out a whoop of joy and pulled her to her feet, spinning her around the kitchen until they were both dizzy and laughing. Then he was kissing her again, and Nora thought she might die from happiness. "We should still write to your aunt," Owen said when they finally came up for air. "Let her know you are safe and that you are getting married. Maybe she and her husband can come to the wedding." "That would be wonderful," Nora agreed. "I would like to have family there." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. They were married in the small church in Ukiah on a bright August morning, with Mrs. Chen and several of Owen's ranching friends in attendance. To Nora's joy, Aunt Louise and her husband George made the journey to be there. Louise turned out to be a warm, kind woman who looked remarkably like Nora's mother. She cried when she first saw Nora, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I am so sorry about your parents," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your mother and I were both too stubborn for our own good. I wish we had reconciled before it was too late." "She kept your letter all those years," Nora told her. "That has to mean something." "It does," Louise agreed, wiping her eyes. "And now I get to be here for one of the happiest days of your life. I am grateful for that." The wedding was simple but beautiful. Nora wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her alter from one that had belonged to Owen's mother. It was cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Owen wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous as he waited for her at the altar. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her thoroughly, ignoring the good-natured laughter from their guests. Nora felt like she was floating as they walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and more food than Nora had ever seen in one place. Owen's friends had pitched in to provide beef and fresh vegetables, and Mrs. Chen had baked a beautiful cake. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, someone brought out a fiddle and there was dancing. Owen held Nora close as they swayed to the music, his cheek pressed against her hair. "Happy," he murmured. "More than I ever thought possible," Nora replied honestly. "6 weeks ago I was dying in the street. Now I am married to the man I love, surrounded by friends and family. It feels like a dream." "Not a dream," Owen said, pulling back to look at her. "This is real and it is forever. You are stuck with me now, Mrs. Lawson." "I can think of worse fates," Nora teased and kissed him softly. As the party wound down and guests began to depart, Aunt Louise pulled Nora aside. "You are sure about this?" she asked gently. "It is not too late to change your mind and come stay with George and me." "I am completely sure," Nora said firmly. "Owen is the best man I have ever known, and I love him with all my heart. This is where I am meant to be." Louise smiled and touched Nora's cheek gently. "You have your mother's strength and your father's heart. They would be so proud of you, and I am too. You take care of each other, you hear?" "We will," Nora promised. Finally, everyone was gone and Nora and Owen were alone. The house seemed very quiet after all the noise and laughter. Owen locked the door and turned to find Nora watching him nervously. "Having second thoughts?" he asked gently. "No, just nervous. My mother tried to explain what happens on a wedding night, but she got embarrassed and the explanation was rather vague." Owen crossed to her and took her hands. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. We can just sleep if you prefer." But Nora shook her head. "I want this. I want you. I am just new to all of it." "Then we will figure it out together," Owen said and led her to their bedroom. The night was everything Nora had hoped and more. Owen was gentle and patient, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. When she finally fell asleep in his arms, utterly exhausted and completely happy, she thought that nothing could ever be better than this moment. The first year of their marriage was not easy. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were times when money was tight. But they faced everything together, and Nora discovered a strength in herself she had not known existed. She learned to help with the cattle, to ride a horse competently if not gracefully, to shoot a rifle well enough to protect the chickens from predators. Owen taught her everything with patience and encouragement, never making her feel inadequate when she struggled. And in return, Nora transformed the house into a real home. She planted flowers around the porch, put up curtains she sewed herself, filled the rooms with the smell of good cooking and the sound of her singing. They developed routines and rituals. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Evening walks around the property, hand in hand, talking about their days. Sunday suppers that grew more elaborate as Nora's cooking skills improved. And every night, falling asleep wrapped in each other's arms. Aunt Louise and George visited several times that first year, and the relationship between Nora and her aunt deepened. Louise shared stories about Nora's mother as a girl, filling in pieces of family history Nora had never known. It was healing in a way Nora had not expected, connecting her to her past while building her future. In the spring of 1883, Nora realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not wanted to say anything until she was sure. When she finally told Owen, he picked her up and spun her around just like he had the day she agreed to marry him. "A baby," he kept saying, his eyes bright with tears. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Nora asked, though she could see the answer on his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. Terrified, excited, grateful, amazed, all of those and more. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your mother and I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy was not easy. Nora was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. Owen was attentive and worried, bringing her cool cloths and weak tea and sitting with her when the nausea was particularly bad. Mrs. Chen, who had delivered many babies in her time, stopped by regularly to check on Nora and offer advice. Aunt Louise sent packages of baby clothes and blankets she had made herself. Owen started building a cradle in the barn, working on it whenever he had a spare moment. As Nora's belly grew, so did Owen's protectiveness. He tried to keep her from doing any heavy work, which led to their first real argument as a married couple. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Nora said in exasperation when Owen tried to take the laundry basket from her for the third time that week. "Women have been doing household work while pregnant since the beginning of time." "I know, but you are not just any woman. You are my wife, carrying my child, and I will not risk anything happening to either of you." "Owen, I love you, but you need to let me live my life. I promise I will not do anything dangerous or too strenuous. But I need to feel useful. Sitting around all day doing nothing is making me crazy." They compromised, with Nora doing lighter tasks and Owen taking over the heavier work. It was not perfect, but they were learning to navigate disagreements together, to communicate and find middle ground. In December of 1883, after 12 hours of hard labor with Mrs. Chen attending and Owen pacing a hole in the floor outside the bedroom, Nora gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Owen Lawson, after Owen's father. When Owen finally got to hold his son, tears streaming openly down his face, Nora thought her heart might burst with love. This man, this good, kind, strong man, was her husband and the father of her child. She had come so close to dying in the streets of Ukiah, and now here she was, surrounded by more love than she had ever imagined possible. "Thank you," Owen whispered, looking from the baby to Nora. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for everything." "Thank you for stopping," Nora replied softly. "Thank you for not walking past me that day. Thank you for saving my life in every way that matters." The early days with baby Thomas were exhausting but joyful. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's nose. Owen was a natural father, patient and gentle, singing lullabies in his rough voice and walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy. Nora watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. She had not thought it possible to love Owen more than she already did, but seeing him as a father opened up whole new depths of feeling. As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. Owen made some smart decisions about breeding stock and expanded the herd. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, able to save a little money and make improvements to the property. When Thomas was 2, they added a room onto the house for him, giving him his own space. Owen built the furniture himself, a small bed and dresser and toy chest, all carefully sanded and painted. Nora sewed curtains and a quilt, creating a cozy space for their growing boy. Thomas was a bright, curious child who followed Owen everywhere, mimicking his father's mannerisms and asking endless questions about the ranch and the cattle and everything he saw. Owen answered every question with patience, treating his young son's curiosity with respect. In the summer of 1886, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This time the morning sickness was not as severe, and she felt stronger throughout the pregnancy. Thomas, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his mother's growing belly and insisted on talking to the baby every night before bed. "Hello, baby," he would say seriously, his small hand on Nora's stomach. "This is Thomas. I am your big brother. I will teach you everything when you get here." Owen would catch Nora's eye over Thomas's head, and they would share a smile. both of them falling a little more in love with each other and their growing family. Their daughter was born in March of 1887, a beautiful baby girl with bright eyes and a cap of soft blonde hair. They named her Emily Rose Lawson, and Thomas was instantly smitten with his baby sister. "She is so small," he whispered in awe the first time he got to hold her with Owen's help. "We have to take good care of her." "We will," Owen assured him. "That is what big brothers do." Life settled into a new rhythm with two children. The house was fuller and louder, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and occasional tears. Nora sometimes felt exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion, born of love and purpose. Owen continued to be a devoted husband and father. He took over many of the household tasks without being asked, understanding that Nora had her hands full with two small children. They worked as a team, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the victories together. When Emily was 6 months old, Aunt Louise and George came for a visit and brought surprising news. They had decided to sell their ranch and move closer to Ukiah. George's health was not what it used to be, and they wanted to be near family in their later years. "If you would have us," Louise said to Nora and Owen, "we do not want to impose, but we would love to be close enough to watch these beautiful children grow up." "We would be honored," Owen said immediately, and Nora agreed enthusiastically. Having her aunt nearby felt like the final piece falling into place, connecting her past and present in a way that brought healing and joy. Louise and George bought a small place just a few miles from Owen and Nora's ranch. They became regular fixtures in the children's lives, doting grandparents in all but name. George, despite his declining health, loved taking Thomas out to teach him about tracking and woodcraft. Louise spent hours with Emily, singing to her and telling her stories. The years passed in a blur of birthday parties and holidays, of cattle drives and harvest festivals, of quiet evenings on the porch and busy days full of work and laughter. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible boy who took his role as big brother very seriously. Emily was bright and spirited, with a laugh that could light up a room. In 1890, Nora found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and at 31 years old, she felt every day of it. But Owen was there every step of the way, rubbing her aching back and bringing her cold drinks on hot days and reading to her when she was too uncomfortable to sleep. Their second son, Daniel James Lawson, was born in January of 1891. He was a big baby, nearly 10 pounds, and the delivery was difficult. Mrs. Chen warned them that Nora should not have any more children, that another pregnancy could be dangerous. Owen held his new son with joy tempered by worry for Nora. "Are you all right?" he asked her, his eyes searching her face. "I am fine," Nora assured him, tired but happy. "Better than fine. Look at our family, Owen, 3 beautiful children and each other. We have everything I ever dreamed of and more." Thomas and Emily adored their baby brother from the start. At 7 and 4 years old, respectively, they were old enough to help with small tasks, fetching diapers and making silly faces to make Daniel smile. The ranch continued to thrive under Owen's careful management. He hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work, young men who respected Owen's fair treatment and worked hard in return. The cattle herd had grown significantly, and they were able to add more land to their holdings. Nora had become a respected member of the community in her own right. She had a reputation for her cooking and her kindness, always ready to help a neighbor in need. She organized fundraisers for the church and taught Sunday school to the younger children. The woman who had nearly died of starvation on the streets of Ukiah was now a pillar of the community. But through all the growth and change, the core of their life remained the same. Nora and Owen, together against whatever the world threw at them. Their love had only deepened over the years, weathering challenges and celebrating triumphs as a team. One evening, when Daniel was about 6 months old, Nora stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Owen came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Everything. Nothing. How different my life could have been if you had not stopped that day in Ukiah." Nora turned in his arms to face him. "I think about that sometimes, about what would have happened if you had just walked past like everyone else." "I could never have walked past you," Owen said seriously. "Even if I had wanted to, which I did not, I could not have done it. Something in me recognized something in you. We were meant to find each other, Nora. I truly believe that." "I believe it too," Nora said, reaching up to touch his face. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the years, and there was silver starting to show in his hair, but to her he was more handsome than ever. "I love you, Owen Lawson, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "I love you too," Owen said and kissed her tenderly. After all these years, his kisses still made her heart race. "You are everything to me, Nora. Everything." They stood together on the porch as the stars began to come out, listening to the distant sounds of cattle and the closer sounds of their children playing inside the house. It was a perfect moment, simple and profound, and Nora wanted to hold on to it forever. As the children grew older, they each developed their own personalities and interests. Thomas was quiet and thoughtful, happiest when working with the cattle or reading in his room. He had inherited his mother's love of books and his father's way with animals. By the time he was 10, he was Owen's right hand on the ranch, capable and reliable beyond his years. Emily was the opposite, all energy and laughter and curiosity about everything. She drove Nora to distraction sometimes with her endless questions and her tendency to get into mischief, but she had a heart of gold. She loved helping in the kitchen and had shown real talent for cooking and baking. Daniel, the baby of the family, was a perfect mix of his siblings. He had Thomas's thoughtfulness and Emily's energy, and he charmed everyone he met. At 4 years old, he followed his father and older brother around the ranch, determined to do everything they did even though his legs were much shorter. In 1895, tragedy struck when George passed away quietly in his sleep. It was not unexpected, given his failing health, but it hit the family hard. Louise was devastated, having lost her companion of over 30 years. Nora and Owen invited Louise to come live with them, and after some hesitation, she agreed. They converted Owen's old office into a bedroom for her, and she settled into the household seamlessly. Having her grandmother living with them was a joy for the children, and Louise seemed to find purpose in helping care for her great-nieces and nephew. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Louise told Nora one evening as they sat together mending clothes. "The woman you have become, the family you have built with Owen, you took tragedy and turned it into something beautiful." "I had help," Nora said, smiling at her aunt. "From you, from Owen, from everyone who reached out a hand when I needed it. I learned that accepting help is not weakness, it is strength. And that giving help, the way Owen helped me, is one of the most powerful things we can do." As the century drew to a close, the Lawson family was firmly established as one of the most respected in the area. The ranch was prosperous, the children were healthy and happy, and Nora and Owen's love was as strong as ever. On their 15th wedding anniversary in August of 1897, Owen took Nora back to Ukiah, to the very spot where he had first found her. It was not something they had planned, but they happened to be in town together and found themselves standing in front of the general store. "I was right here," Nora said quietly, pointing to the post she had been leaning against. "I thought I was going to die. I had given up completely." "And I was coming around that corner," Owen said, pointing. "I saw you and something in me just knew I could not walk past. I had to help." "You did more than help. You gave me a life, a family, more happiness than I thought was possible." Nora turned to him, tears in her eyes. "Every good thing I have, every moment of joy, it all started here with you." Owen pulled her close, not caring that they were standing in the middle of the street. "You gave me just as much. Before you, I was just going through the motions. The ranch, the work, it was all I had. But you brought color and life and meaning to everything. You made me understand what love really is." They kissed there on the street where their story had begun, and when they pulled apart, Nora was laughing through her tears. "What?" Owen asked, smiling at her joy. "I am just so happy. Sometimes I worry that I will wake up and discover this has all been a dream, that I am still dying on this street and my brain is creating some beautiful fantasy as I slip away." "Not a dream," Owen said firmly. "Real, all of it, and we have years and years ahead of us still." Thomas graduated from the local school at the top of his class in 1898. At 14, he announced his intention to stay on the ranch and work with his father rather than pursue more education. Owen was clearly pleased, though he made sure Thomas understood it was his choice to make. "This ranch will be yours someday," Owen told his son. "Yours and your brothers and sisters if they want it. I want you to know what you are taking on, to really understand the work and the responsibility." "I know, Pa," Thomas said seriously. "I have been watching you my whole life. I know how hard you work, how much you care about the land and the cattle and doing things right. That is what I want too, to build something lasting the way you and Ma have." Emily, at 11, announced that she wanted to open a bakery someday. She had been experimenting with recipes, and her cakes and pastries were already better than anything available in town. Nora encouraged her daughter's ambitions, proud of her entrepreneurial spirit. Daniel, at 7, was still figuring out what interested him most. He loved the ranch, but also showed talent for drawing and music. Owen and Nora agreed to let him explore different interests, knowing he would find his path in time. As the new century dawned in 1900, the Lawson family gathered on their porch to watch fireworks being set off in town in the distance. Nora, now 37, sat between Owen and Aunt Louise with the children sprawled on the porch steps. "A new century," Louise said wonderingly. "Who knows what changes it will bring? Whatever comes, we will face it together," Owen said, reaching over to take Nora's hand. "That is what families do." "Together," Nora agreed, squeezing his hand. She looked around at her family, at the ranch that had become her home, at the life she had built from nothing. 18 years ago she had been dying, hopeless and alone. Now she had everything. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. There were bad years when the weather did not cooperate and money was tight. There were good years when the cattle thrived and they could afford improvements and small luxuries. Through it all, Nora and Owen faced everything side by side, their partnership as strong as ever. Thomas began courting a girl from a neighboring ranch when he was 18, a sweet-natured young woman named Sarah who fit into the family perfectly. They married when he was 20, in 1904, and Owen deeded them a portion of the ranch to start their own spread. Emily did indeed open her bakery in Ukiah when she turned 19 in 1903. It was an immediate success, and she had regular customers coming from miles around for her cakes and pastries. She was courted by half the young men in the county, but remained stubbornly independent, declaring she would only marry for love. Daniel, showing a gift for figures and organization, took over managing the ranch's books and financial matters when he was 16. He also started a small horse breeding program, developing a reputation for producing quality animals. Aunt Louise passed peacefully in her sleep in 1905, at the age of 78. She had lived to see her great-nieces and nephews grow into fine young adults, and she died knowing she was loved. They buried her next to George, and Nora planted a rose garden around their graves that bloomed every spring. In 1907, Thomas and Sarah presented Owen and Nora with their first grandchild, a baby boy they named Owen after his grandfather. Holding his tiny grandson for the first time, Owen cried openly, overwhelmed by emotion. "Another generation," he said to Nora that night as they lay in bed. "Our family continues to grow. Sometimes I still cannot believe all of this came from that day I found you on the street." "Everything good in my life traces back to that moment," Nora said. "To your kindness and compassion. You saved me in every way a person can be saved, Owen." "We saved each other," Owen corrected gently. "I was half alive before you. You gave me purpose and love and a reason to build something lasting. We saved each other, and we built this life together." Emily finally fell in love in 1908 with a merchant who had opened a new dry goods store in Ukiah. James was a kind, intelligent man who respected Emily's independence and supported her business ambitions. They married that fall, and Emily moved her bakery to a larger location next to his store. Daniel married the schoolteacher, a woman named Catherine who shared his love of learning and had a sharp mind for business. Together, they expanded the horse breeding program into a profitable venture that supplemented the ranch's cattle income. As Owen and Nora moved into their 50s, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Thomas had proven himself more than capable of running things, and Daniel's business acumen kept them financially stable. It gave Nora and Owen time to enjoy the things they had missed while building their empire. They took long rides together through the mountains, just the two of them like when they were newlyweds. They spent lazy afternoons on the porch, reading or just sitting in comfortable silence. They played with their growing collection of grandchildren, spoiling them in the way grandparents do. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Nora asked Owen one evening as they watched the sunset. "When you brought me to the ranch." "I said a lot of things that day," Owen replied, smiling. "You promised me I would never hunger again. And you kept that promise, Owen. Not just with food, though you certainly did that too. But I never hungered for love, for security, for purpose. You gave me everything I needed and more." Owen pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Best promise I ever made. Best decision I ever made, stopping to help you that day. Changed my whole life for the better." "Mine too," Nora whispered. In 1912, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a huge party. All three of their children were there with their spouses, along with 7 grandchildren ranging in age from infant to 5 years old. Friends and neighbors from all over the area came to celebrate with them. As Nora looked around at the crowd gathered on their land, at the ranch they had built together, at the family they had created, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She caught Owen's eye across the yard and he smiled at her, that same warm smile that had made her feel safe all those years ago. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and they were alone in their bedroom, Owen gave Nora a small wrapped package. "What is this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a delicate gold locket. When Nora opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Owen on one side and one of herself on the other. They were much younger in the photos, taken perhaps 10 years ago, but still recognizably themselves. "I wanted you to have something to mark 30 years, Owen explained. "Something that showed where we started and how far we have come." I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, Nora, and I did not think that was possible. But my love for you just keeps growing. I love you too, Nora said, tears streaming down her face as she fastened the locket around her neck. Always and forever. They made love that night with the passion and tenderness of people who knew each other completely, who had weathered decades together and come through stronger for it. When Nora fell asleep in Owen's arms, she felt completely content, completely happy, completely loved. The war in Europe seemed far away from their ranch in California, but it touched them nonetheless. In 1917, Thomas's oldest son, young Owen, enlisted despite being only 17. He lied about his age, desperate to serve his country. The family gathered to see him off, and Nora held her grandson tight, remembering another young man full of strength and honor. "Come back to us," she whispered. "Please come back." Young Owen did come back in 1919, changed by what he had seen, but still fundamentally the good young man they had raised. The ranch gave him peace as he readjusted to civilian life, the work and the land providing healing in ways words never could. As Nora and Owen entered their 60s, their pace slowed but their love never dimmed. Owen's hair was completely silver now, and Nora's was more gray than brown. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had fallen in love with decades ago. They had 15 grandchildren now, with more on the way as their children's families continued to grow. The ranch had expanded to over 1,000 acres, with portions divided among Thomas, Emily, and Daniel. The Lawson name was respected throughout the region, synonymous with integrity and quality. But through all the success and growth, Nora and Owen never forgot where they had started. Every year on the anniversary of the day Owen had found her, they made a donation to organizations that helped the poor and hungry. They made sure no one in their community went without food or shelter if they could help it. "I cannot save everyone," Owen said once when Nora found him giving money to a drifter who had come looking for work. "But I can help where I can, just like I helped you." "And that help ripples outward," Nora said, coming to stand beside him. "That man you just helped, who knows what good he might do in the world now that he has a chance. Kindness multiplies, Owen. You taught me that." In the spring of 1925, they celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They were both slowing down now, Owen's joints aching from decades of hard work and Nora's energy not what it used to be. But their minds were still sharp, and their love still strong. They sat on the porch they had sat on countless times before, watching the sun set over land they knew intimately. Owen reached over and took Nora's hand, and they sat in the comfortable silence of two people who no longer needed words to communicate. "Nora," Owen said eventually, his voice soft. "If I could go back and live my life over again, knowing everything that was going to happen, I would not change a single thing. Every moment, good and bad, led me to you and built this life we share. I would do it all again exactly the same way." "So would I," Nora said, squeezing his hand. "Even the hard parts, even the pain, it was all worth it to end up here with you. You kept your promise, Owen. I never hungered again, not for a single day. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Owen corrected. "That is what love is, Nora. Giving everything and receiving everything in return." As the stars came out overhead and the cool evening breeze rustled through the trees, Nora leaned her head on Owen's shoulder and felt completely at peace. She had lived a good life, a rich life full of love and purpose. And it had all started with a single act of kindness from a cowboy who could not walk past someone in need. Whatever years they had left, whether many or few, they would spend them together. Just as they had spent every day since that fateful afternoon in Ukiah, when Owen had knelt beside her and promised she would never hunger again. It was a promise he had kept in every way that mattered, and Nora knew with absolute certainty that he would continue keeping it until the very end. Their love story had started on a dusty street in a small California town in 1882, when a starving woman met a compassionate cowboy. Now, over 40 years later, that love was still going strong, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the endless possibilities that open up when two people choose to face the world together. And as they sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built and the family they had created, both Nora and Owen knew they had found something rare and precious. They had found true love, the kind that lasts forever, the kind that transforms lives and creates legacies. It was everything they had ever wanted, and more than they had ever dreamed possible. The years continued their gentle march forward, bringing the inevitable changes that time always brings. Owen's steps grew slower, his once powerful frame growing frailer with age. Nora's hands developed arthritis that made the fine needlework she loved more difficult. But they adapted, supporting each other through each challenge the way they always had. Their children were all well established now, pillars of the community in their own right. Thomas ran the main ranch with quiet efficiency, his own children learning the trade just as he had learned from Owen. Emily's bakery had become a beloved institution in Ukiah, and she had trained several young women in the art of baking, passing on her skills to the next generation. Daniel's horse breeding program had gained regional fame, with buyers coming from as far as San Francisco to purchase his animals. The grandchildren were growing up now, too. Young Owen, who had survived the war, had married and given Thomas and Sarah their first great-grandchildren. Soon there would be a fourth generation carrying on the Lawson name and traditions. On a warm September afternoon in 1928, Nora stood in her kitchen making preserves from the late summer fruit. She was 65 years old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with age. But her eyes were still bright, and when she smiled, she still looked like the girl Owen had fallen in love with all those years ago. Owen came in from outside, moving carefully with the aid of a walking stick he had recently started using. At 71, he had earned his slower pace, but it frustrated him nonetheless. He had always been a man of action, and accepting his physical limitations was not easy. "Smells good in here," he said, coming to stand beside Nora and peer into the pot of bubbling jam. "Plum preserves," Nora said. "Remember when we planted that plum tree the year Thomas was born? I never imagined it would still be producing fruit 45 years later." "That tree is like us," Owen said with a soft smile. "Still standing, still producing, still here despite everything." Nora laughed and leaned against him, careful not to upset his balance. "That is a romantic sentiment, comparing me to a fruit tree." "A beautiful, productive fruit tree," Owen amended and kissed her cheek. They were interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. Looking out the window, they saw young Owen riding up with his wife Mary and their 2 small children. "Surprise visit," Nora said happily. She always loved having family around, and these surprise visits had become more common as she and Owen aged. Their children and grandchildren seemed to be making sure to spend time with them while they could, though no one said it directly. The afternoon passed pleasantly with talk and laughter, the children running around the yard and playing while the adults sat on the porch. Young Owen told them about the new barn he was building, and Mary shared news from town. It was ordinary and perfect, the kind of day Nora treasured. As evening fell and their guests departed, Owen and Nora found themselves alone once more. They prepared a simple dinner together, moving around the kitchen with the practiced ease of decades. Their conversation was comfortable, full of shared jokes and memories. That night, as they prepared for bed, Owen moved more slowly than usual. Nora noticed but did not comment, knowing he would not appreciate her fussing. They had both agreed long ago to face aging with dignity, supporting each other without hovering. They climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared since their wedding night 46 years ago. Owen pulled Nora close, and she nestled against him, her head on his chest like always. "I love you," Owen murmured into her hair. "I need you to know that. Every single day of these past 46 years has been a gift because you were in it." "I love you too," Nora said, feeling a strange tightness in her chest at the intensity in his voice. "Are you all right, Owen?" "I am perfect," he said. "I have you and I have my family and I have lived a good life. I am more than all right, Nora. I am blessed." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done thousands of nights before. When Nora woke in the morning, she knew immediately that something was wrong. Owen was still beside her, still holding her, but he was too still, too quiet. With a trembling hand, she reached up to touch his face and found it cool. "Owen," she whispered, though she already knew. "Owen, no, please, no." But Owen was gone, had slipped away peacefully in his sleep while holding the woman he loved. His face was peaceful, almost smiling, as if he had welcomed whatever came next. Nora lay there for a long time, her head on his chest, crying silently. She knew she should get up, should call for help, should do something. But she could not bring herself to move to break this final embrace. Eventually, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, she forced herself to rise. With shaking hands, she dressed and then walked to the main house where Thomas and Sarah lived. Her son took one look at her face and knew. The funeral 3 days later was one of the largest Ukiah had ever seen. People came from all over the region to pay their respects to Owen Lawson, a man known for his integrity, his kindness, and his love for his family. They told stories about his fairness as a rancher, his generosity to those in need, his devotion to his wife and children. Nora sat through it all in a daze, accepting condolences and sympathy with automatic grace. But inside she felt hollow, as if the best part of her had been buried with Owen. In the weeks that followed, Nora moved through her days mechanically. Her children wanted her to come stay with one of them, worried about her being alone. But Nora refused. This house, this ranch, it was where she and Owen had built their life together. She could not leave it, not yet. She spent long hours sitting in Owen's chair on the porch, wrapped in one of his old shirts that still smelled faintly of him. She talked to him sometimes, telling him about her day, sharing the little moments he would have appreciated. Slowly, with the support of her family, Nora began to heal. Not to forget or to stop grieving, but to learn to live with the loss. She found purpose in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in maintaining the legacy she and Owen had built together. She told stories about Owen to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him as long. She showed them the places where he had taught his children to ride, where he had proposed to her, where they had stood together watching sunsets for decades. On what would have been their 47th wedding anniversary, Nora walked to town and stood on the spot where Owen had first found her. She had not been back to this exact spot since their 15th anniversary, but now it called to her. "I wish you were still here," she said softly, as if Owen could hear her. "But I understand. You gave me 46 years, and they were the best years anyone could ask for. You kept your promise, Owen. I never hungered again, not once. You filled my life with so much love and purpose that I am still living on it even now that you are gone." A young woman walking past gave her a curious look, and Nora smiled despite her tears. She probably looked like a crazy old woman talking to empty air, but she did not care. As she walked home, Nora thought about the incredible journey her life had been. From dying on the street to building a ranching dynasty. From hopeless and alone to surrounded by love and family. All because one man had chosen not to walk past someone in need. That was Owen's true legacy, Nora realized. Not the ranch or the cattle or the financial success. It was the ripples of kindness that spread outward from his actions. He had saved her, and together they had built something beautiful that would continue long after both of them were gone. Nora lived for 3 more years after Owen's death, remaining sharp and engaged despite her advancing age. She saw the birth of several more great-grandchildren, attended weddings and celebrations, and remained the matriarch of the family Owen had started when he brought her home from Ukiah. She passed away peacefully in the spring of 1931 in her sleep, just like Owen. Her children found her in her bed, wearing the locket Owen had given her for their 30th anniversary, a serene smile on her face. They buried her beside Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The gravestone reads simply, Nora Langley Lawson, 1863–1931, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she never hungered again. The Lawson Ranch continued to thrive for generations after Nora and Owen were gone. Their children passed it down to their children, who passed it down to theirs. The story of how it all began, of the starving woman and the cowboy who could not walk past her, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And every year, on the anniversary of that fateful day in July 1882, the Lawson family gathered at the graves of Nora and Owen to remember and give thanks. Thanks for a love that had transformed lives, for kindness that had created a legacy, and for 2 people who had proven that sometimes the most profound things begin with the simplest act of compassion. The house where Nora and Owen had lived, loved, fought, made up, raised their children, and grown old together was preserved and maintained by the family. It became a gathering place for reunions and celebrations, a physical reminder of where it all started. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, family members swore they could feel the presence of Nora and Owen still there, still watching over the land and the family they had created. Together, even in death, just as they had been together in life. Their story lived on, a testament to the power of love, the importance of kindness, and the incredible things that can happen when someone chooses to help rather than walk away. Owen had taken Nora home and promised she would never hunger again, and he had kept that promise not just with food and shelter, but with a lifetime of love, partnership, and devotion. It was a promise that echoed through the generations, inspiring the Lawson family to treat others with the same compassion Owen had shown Nora. And in that way, his simple act of kindness on a dusty street in Ukiah, California in 1882, continued to make the world a better place long after both he and Nora were gone. That was their true legacy. Not just the ranch or the family or the financial success, but the proof that one person choosing to help another can change everything. That love can grow from the darkest circumstances. That promises kept with whole hearts have the power to transform lives and create ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. Nora had been starving in the street. Owen had taken her home and said she would never hunger again. And in keeping that promise, he had given her not just survival, but a life rich with meaning, love, and purpose. Together, they had built something beautiful that would last forever. Their love story had started with an act of kindness and had grown into something magnificent. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind.